have failed. I accept my role and I apologize even for those a generation ahead of me who will not apologize, or that generation right after me who are too stubborn and think they have made progress and do not feel an apology is needed. But when I look at the end results of how we celebrate Black history, and how can we as a Black people celebrate Black history in the midst of Cajun country and not be offended? I was really just offended by and saddened by one UL student who was at the Martin Luther King Center, who had a Ragin' Cajun t-shirt on. And I said to her, I said, do you realize that the word Cajun and the N-word were synonymous racial slurs? And that it is offensive to some of the elders in the community who know this history? And she said with a lot of confidence, well, yes, I know, but UL gave me my degree. How foolish are we allowing our children to grow up in the understanding or lack of understanding of themselves? When I was at UL, I experienced the seeding of the whole concept Cajun. I witnessed and I warned the Black community with several others that the promotion of Cajun Acadiana was not some momentary zealous reaction of a people, but that it was much greater than that. I warn Black folks in the community that the proliferation of Cajun could have some long-range devastating effects. And those effects would adversely affect Black people for many years. I wanted to share this with you because when I was a student at UL in the early 70s, I was sitting in a classroom and one of the professors began to see the idea that everyone and everything in Southwest Louisiana was Cajun and of Cajun origin. While we sat into the class, he asked the question. He said, how many of you believe you're Cajuns? And everyone in the class, approximately 95%, 96% of the members in the class did not raise their hands. There were only two Blacks, one other person other than myself. Then he explained. He said, if you live in this area for more than 2 years, raise your hand. He said, if you eat makshu, raise your hand. He said, if you eat crawfish, raise your hand. He said, if you eat crawfish etouffee, raise your hand. And most of the class, once he made those remarks, asked the question, as he asked the question, are you Cajun? And again, they didn't know where he was coming from. And he said, well, if you said yes to all the questions that I presented to you, then you're Cajun. So he asked the question again, how many of you now think that you're Cajuns? So 98% of the class basically raised their hand. The other Black student in the class did not raise his hand immediately. He was observing me to see what my reaction was going to be. Obviously, I did not raise my hand. So he inched his hand up because he felt the pressure of the white professor and the white students acknowledging and accepting his rationale in terms of what his history and what his culture was. I refused to do so. So I asked the professor, I said, have you been living in this area for more than 2 years? He said, yes. I said, do you eat red bean and rice? He said, yes. I said, do you eat fried chicken? He said, yes. I said, historically, do you know that the word Cajun and the word nigger were historically racial twin slurs? And he got all frustrated and said, well, where are you going with that? Where are you going with that? Well, I said, sir, I want to be a good student and I want to be mathematically correct. If A is equal to B, then B is equal to A. So I said, based on your rationale in terms of what my culture is, and that makes me a Cajun based on your definition of my culture, then what I just gave to you as a definition of culture, then that makes you a white nigger. Well, that did not go well, obviously, with my instructor at the time. And since that time, I've received nothing but internal pressures and blockades in terms of my progress over at UL, in terms of my educational movements. I'm saying this because I want you to understand that the game that is being played right now under the concept of culture economics, we have to ask the question, what is it? Culture economics simply means that you use the basis of someone's culture or one's group culture in order to generate the economics or all of the needs of that particular culture, of that particular people. That's what culture economics means. It means that you put a value on your historical and cultural existence and you market it throughout. You label it, you're branding it. And everyone who buys into that brand has value to that brand and has a relationship to that brand, therefore produces economics. This is not unusual. This is what people do all over the world. Any group of people, regardless of the color of their skin, whenever they make their culture and their history negotiable and debatable, they lose economically. They lose in terms of sense of purpose and history. They lose in terms of any meaningful identification with any other groups of people. So when I go to community meetings and I attempt to discuss this on the interests of black people and black culture, for our people, for our community, and the idea or concept of culture economic comes up as a platform for discussion, then I ask the question, whose culture? Whose culture are we looking to cultivate in order to produce economics? Now, of course, the general response would be that we're going to be all inclusive. Well, we are inclusive in words, but not necessarily in actions. And when we look at Lafayette and we look at the designation of the cleanest city in Lafayette, and we look at all the accolades that Lafayette gets in terms of a town in southwest Louisiana, then when we look at those accolades that comes to the city heads of Lafayette in referencing this town, then I have to ask the question, it's only an intelligent question. How did the black community fit into this evaluation? Certainly, when Lafayette got the Cleanest City Award, they certainly did not come in the blighted areas on the north side of town where there's economic oppression and economic devastation that exists now in the black community. I'm sure when they talk about all the goods and the benefit that is coming to Lafayette, we are equally disconnected from those resources. So now when we talk about culture economics, I asked the mayor, Robideau, in a meeting, I made reference to this question and to this concern. He chose to just ignore my question. He responded to everyone else in the room, but he ignored my question. I know he knows because he bought a book called Black I Am, Cajun Creole I Am Not. So I'm not under the impression that he does not know the issue. The question is, as an administrator, does he represent everyone here in the Lafayette area equally and fairly? We all pay taxes, however, we do not all get the same treatment. So when we look at culture economics, we're looking at a condition in which the city heads are going to heighten the Cajun mania. They're going to put into motion, or has put into motion, much of the components that is going to generate revenue for the city in the name of culture and history. So where do blacks fit in? We are asked to fit in from the standpoint of allowing ourselves to accept a given or designated culture title under Creole. This is what is happening. Those of us who are black and uninitiated in terms of studying their real history are used by the city to proliferate the idea that there is an inclusiveness that is taking place on the city's effort to create so-called culture economics, because there's a portion of so-called black people who accept and buy into the Creole culture. A concept that has been given to us through a form of slavery. I don't know why black people want to try to force themselves to pretend like we had some kind of love relationship with the French. They have not been our friends. The whole concept of Creole is based on the sexual misuse of black women and young black girls to produce a lighter skinned slave in order to do for them in a different way than they have done for the darker skinned black. It creates division among us. In Portuguese, there's a Portugal word that is called Craola. Craola means Creole, and it means one slave who was born in the house. So when we accept a designation of our historical and cultural context from a distorted and deceiving and deceptive history, then there could be no real economic generating in the black community under this concept unless we first deny who we are. Black people don't need somebody else to assign them history and culture. We have a rich history and culture. Matter of fact, every other history and culture is predicated on studying the black history and the black culture. We are the mothers and fathers of civilization. So when we are approached as a black people in this area to accept the concept of cultural economics, we must be mindful that they're not talking about us. They're not talking about you, black man and black woman. They're not making references to you as a meaningful, as a purposeful black person dealing with your history and your culture. What they're looking for is to find a means in which to pacify the black community and allow you to come in on a distorted or watered down version of your experience as a black man, accepting, again, a culture that was assigned to you by the so-called French people. Now, when you study Creole, and I'm not going to do it on this show, but when you study Creole and the origin of Creole and what that meant to the black community, you would find you have nothing there. You have nothing there to base your cultural and historical value on for economics. The more you are successful with promoting Creole, the further you alienate yourself from your rich black history. The more white folks realize that's my safe Negro. I don't have to concern myself with him, but let someone come out and talk seriously about black and African history, and they become concerned. Because the cultural economics that they're speaking of is Cajun, Acadiana, and it has nothing to do with you. They just want to pacify you. In other words, Lafayette is presently engaged in a modern day nigger-making process for black people inducing culture and historical ignorance among black people and using black resources, our children, to pay for it, all under the name of culture economics. When will we wake up and stop this economic exploitation and cultural devastation in our community? You have to ask yourself the question, and you have to answer it honestly. What is it will black folks get from this so-called promotion of the city for this culture economics? What do we stand to get? What are we sure to get? We're sure to get culture genocide, historical and cultural piracy, taxation without representation, induce black self-hatred, create an oppressive economic exploitative system, fostering white supremacy through a form of colonialism. Today, in today's atmosphere, this is a form of cultural terrorism. Why do I say that? I talk with black people every day who said, I don't buy into this Cajun Creole thing, this Cajun Acadiana Creole thing, but I got to keep my job. So some of them got to answer the phone saying, Acadiana so-and-so, Cajun so-and-so. They put it on your license plate. You go to UL, a public tax-supported institution. They put it in your credit card, Cajun Cash. They put it on your pamphlets. You know, you have a 101 introduction to Cajun history. Then we allow ourselves to be branded with the fleur-de-lis, as though we have some loving and sweet memories about our relationship with the French. Sure, the fleur-de-lis is an original African symbol, but it has been molested like many other good things in our community. We just need to learn the truth about it. But the fleur-de-lis was used as a symbol by the French to brand their niggas, their slaves. And here we are in this cultural economic push. We are accepting that as a basis for our economic growth. Listen, brothers and sisters, I want you to call in. I want you to share your comments and share your thoughts. That number is area code 337-366-8951. Again, that's 337-366-8951. I want you to call in with your comments. Call in and share with me some things that I'm saying to you. I want you to also keep in mind that no matter how much we choose to ignore this, how much we want to devalue it, a long-standing popular lie does not get more truthful with time. It only seeks to impregnate time with baby lies for the purpose of butt-resting and supporting the original mother lie. Truth has a definite beginning and a sure death. Falsehood has a definite beginning and a sure death. It is truth that lives eternal. And in the annals of time, truth will always rise up and serve a death blow to falsehood. This is what's happening now. I remember as a youngster operating out of emotion and not well learned yet, but fearless, courageous, boastful, but not proper direction from my elders. I engaged in the community, and it's one of the reasons why I apologize to the black community. I apologize to the younger generation. In my early 20s, I was part of a project called the Black Santa Project. When I went into the community, I was appalled, like many others who did not know better. I was appalled at the fact that we would go to the mall and we would see a white Santa Claus putting little white girls and little white boys on his lap, and then taking little black boys and little black girls put on his lap and talk about, what do you want for Christmas? Well, I was appalled with that. I was appalled at the idea. I was appalled at the idea that we didn't have a black Santa Claus. So we started the Black Santa Project. And we even had a beautiful song called Santa Claus is a black man, and he's handsome like my daddy too. And in my ignorance, I promoted a black Santa Claus, not realizing that the Santa Claus was not the problem. Santa Claus was the effect that of the greater problem that we were suffering from, and that the whole concept of Christmas was a lie. The whole concept of Santa Claus was a lie, and that we were promoting culture genocide among our own people based on deceit and lies of history. So I apologize to the black community for my role in that. Let's go to the caller. Caller, you're on the air. Question or comment?
Greeting, brother Takuna, man. I'm greatly enjoying the show. You bring out so much good information.
Yes, sir.
Bro, we definitely, I mean, you're hitting the nail on his head in a sense that what we're experiencing in this area, what we have been experiencing for a long, long time, is a lot of our people in the black community are sticking their heads in the sand. Now, you did not make that issue up that you're talking about. Apparently, they got others outside of this area, whether or not they're part of the mainstream media, have read into what's going on in South Louisiana. I would urge everyone who can pick up a book and read or a newspaper to go to the Washington Post. This was a very long, interesting article. And it's akin to what you're saying, Brother Takuna. That's the way I read it. The title is The Differences in Black and White. And it examines the differences in economic situation in the black community in the South, and especially in the St. Martinville, Library, Lafayette area. And many mentions of the word Cajun and Creole was in that article. Now, if black folks are not faring that good under this system, that's a telling sign. If the Washington Post is printed, and I'm not one to pump up the mainstream media, but it's a telling article if you take it and you dissect it. So I urge everyone to grab the article that came out this week in the Washington Post, The Differences in Black and White. And I think I sent it to you, Brother Takuna. Sometimes we have to go outside this area and get other ways of informing our people in order for them to believe.
Yes,
the problem with some of our people, they don't want to believe. And a lot of our leadership do not want to believe. Or if they do believe, they're part of the problem. My other issue, Brother Takuna, and I want you to really speak to this, is the use of media in the dumbing down and the simulation tactics they use in this area of media. Now, we have some people, some so-called leaders who are on talk shows and doing talk shows on corporate-owned media, and that's corporate-owned media. Black folks should always be reminded that those major media outlets, however popular they are, they're owned by the major corporation. The major corporation does not have the interest of black folks as a whole. What they want to do is black folks turn over their money, turn over the entertainment dollar and value, promote that, and after that, all you get is a watered-down version of what's happening in your community. Even the so-called black-owned media, which is limited, are too afraid to speak truth. To say black folks make a sizable part of the population, Brother Takuna, we are spoon-fed information that we need in our daily lives to govern. And it's so sad that the leadership, the community leaders who have access to control media would give us so much of a watered-down version of what's happening. Now, that's why I definitely appreciate shows that come on like the Community Center, which when you come on, Brother Takuna and Sister Khadijah, to inform out. If there wasn't shows like this, we wouldn't have anything. But we got to hold them accountable, these so-called people who are using the media, dumbing down our people. You would ask, if we spend all this money on Zydeco and bands and rhythm and blues, why we got so much limited information when it comes to media? You ask the question. So thank you so much, Brother Takuna, for your valuable input.
Thank you, caller. Thank you, caller, for that mouthful. And let me address your first concern, your first question. I am thankful that you did share that article with me, and I did read it in its entirety. That article does reference the activities going on in the St. Martinville area. I'm pretty familiar with St. Martinville to some degree. St. Martinville represents right now about 68 68 to 63% blacks and about 35% white. That is as segregated today as it was 60 years ago. If not physically, certainly mentally and economically, culturally, and historically. When you go to St. Martinville, it is obvious when you're on the black side and when you're on the white side, and oftentimes it's separated by a street or a building or a couple of streets. The illusion or delusion that many of us engage in is that we're somehow free and we're in a better place and a better land. That is not necessarily the case when you look at what is at stake and how these decision makers are making decisions that affects our interests, either adversely or otherwise. Well, you have in the St. Martinville area the whole concept of, again, cultural economics. They're trying to make the entire St. Martinville area reflect a Cajun, Acadiana flavor, just ignoring the black community. And those from the black community who wants to be part of the projected economic growth has to submit to a culture and a history that's not theirs. So in effect, what they do, they submit to the Creole culture, a few of them, and the blacks who reject or resist are economically shunned or economically put into a position as though they can't seemingly make any progress. That is cultural terrorism. That is economic exploitation. The museum in the St. Martinville area also carries with it state and federal funds, which primarily was sought after trying to indicate that it was supposed to be a museum reflecting black history. Well, that is not necessarily the case. Matter of fact, when you go there, you'll find out the museum that they classify as a building that they classify as a museum contains 95% of Cajun stuff. They flash a little bit of Creole stuff on the wall to make blacks think that's your role, that's your culture, that's your history. And the bulk of the monies that are tax dollars, public monies, are going to promote Cajun Acadiana. This is no different what is happening here. There is obvious historical and cultural history in the St. Martinville area that is not favorable for black people. There is still studies and origin of remnants of the KKK that is still very active in that area. How do we allow ourselves to sit back quietly with the devastation that is actually taking place in our community, and we reject and we respond negatively to people like me who speak out and tell the truth? It is the kind of problem and dilemma that plays itself out over and over. Now, your second question, as far as the media is concerned, there is no black media when we have a media personality that conforms to the Eurocentric needs and interests of a people other than his own people. There is no black media. We have black personalities who are handcuffed. They say, I have the freedom to speak. What they really mean is that I have the freedom to speak what the white boss tells me I can speak on. No more, no less. So when we understand things like that, then we understand and don't get fooled with the idea that we have a black media because we have a black personality that fronts that black media. We must and always be conscious of the media, because the media sets the perception of what the public sees. Perception is reality, whether we agree with it, whether it's a wrong perception or deceptive perception, it is a perception. They set the narrative through their media. That's why it's so difficult for us to get independent media. Let me take this caller. Caller, you on the air. Caller, you on the air. Question or comment? Okay, I missed that caller. Call back. But the media is a very, very important instrument in creating ideas that appear seemingly true. That's why when you get print, now digital media, into play, the idea doesn't have to be true. The idea does not even have to be valid in any form but they can control the narrative to the point where they put a value on what their point of view is and try to sell it to the public. You on the air? Question or comment?
Okay, Brother Takuna.
Hello, sister. How are you?
I'm fine. Yeah, many of us have been fighting this Kunas mania for quite some time.
Yes.
And you're absolutely correct. The taxation without representation is just a bit minimal. So it's something that we must continue to fight against.
Yes.
I was calling to let you know that I heard the introduction about the open channel. There are a group of us who have renamed our group, including your director and producer, the African Open Channel.
Yes.
And that better reflects our culture, and it's a name that we are desiring to promote. So we'd appreciate it if you, when you're talking about the open channel, maybe using the term African Open Channel.
Yes.
At least consider it.
Yes.
Consider using the term African Open Channel, because we do have a group, and it's a large group of us who are calling ourselves the African Open Channel.
Yes.
So that's my comment.
Yes. Let me share this with you, sister. Before you
Okay.
hang up, let me share this with you. I certainly have considered that. Matter of fact, years ago I mentioned to it that if we wanted to be as narrow-minded as the Cajuns, we would name it the African Open Channel. If we wanted to be inclusive and be fair, we would try to set it up where we could include everybody. But I say African Open Channel, if you please, an affordable open channel as well. Now, however, I have no problems with either one, with the exception of the fact that if we object to Acadiana Open Channel and we say that that's not inclusive of us, then we're taking tax dollars and tax monies. Can we say this whole community is of Africans? I think in its origin, we go deep enough, everyone is from Africa. So that would even be more acceptable and more applicable than Acadian Open Channel. However, I respect your view, and I certainly would not object to the reference of African Open Channel. But I'm just simply trying to be fair and just, which has not been done to us. You see, so that's the rationale. That's the rationale.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point. They're never fair and just to us.
That's right.
So, we're always bending over backwards to be inclusive and to be fair and to be just. But there comes a time when we just have to say, we're going to reflect our culture and our identity. And that is African. And the reason I'm saying that, I'm not just putting that out.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to pick this name. We actually have a group. That's the name of our group. As we sign up for membership at the Open Channel, our group is named the African Open Channel.
Yes.
So we're reflecting our group. We're not excluding anybody else. We're just saying this is the group, and it better reflects us, and it better reflects the culture.
And I agree. Matter of fact, I remember years ago I was the one who opened the door on that, because I came on the show one time and I actually said African Open Channel if you dare, affordable open channel if you please. Now you pick you pick. We trying to be fair, but I have no objections to the effort. And if it pleases the black community, African Open Channel it is.
Okay, and then there's the dividing line. We know if you're conscious and if you're trying to promote the culture and you're trying to say you're with us or you're against us. Africa reflects everyone that's on this planet.
That's right.
I started on the African channel.
Our history and our culture is inclusive. Yes.
Brother Takuna,
Yes.
you're a black person to not embrace an African Open Channel when we are so abused by this culture. And as you stated,
Yes.
if you're going to school there, you have to get that Kunas card. You got to drive down Kunas Boulevard. You got to go to the Kunas restaurant. I mean, it's just the Kunastrodome. I mean, we bombarded with Kunas everywhere.
We can have an African Open
Just
Channel.
Be able to say one little time
I'm with
There's
you.
a group named Open Channel. That's the dividing line. Now
I'm
we
with
know
you.
who's with us and we know who's against us.
I'm with you. Thank you
So
for
that's
calling,
the point that I'm
sister.
making today.
Thank you. Thank you for
I
calling.
commend the director and the producer and yourself. Great show. Thank you.
Thank you, sister.
I don't tap.
Hotep, sister. I think that caller, because many of us are afraid to acknowledge that point. Let me take another call here. Calling on the line. Comment or
Yes,
question?
my question is, why black folks don't accept their own black culture to their period of life here, and clearly those that deny their culture because they don't realize what is our culture.
Well, okay, that's your question, brother? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Okay, thank you for calling, sir. We won't accept our culture, brother, because most of us don't know it. And when we do find out a little about our culture, most of us reject it because the acceptance of who we are put us in direct odds with the European culture, the European people, our oppressors. So therefore, we shun who we are to try to accommodate the white oppressive forces that we feel. Just as the last caller talked about the African open channel versus affordable open channel. You know, I presented both from the very beginning. Matter of fact, I almost did not participate on the AOC broadcasts in the past because I was rejecting the AOC designation as Acadian Open Channel. These are federal dollars, these are state dollars. We won't embrace and accept that. So as the caller said, the points are well made. You know, everything else. They even took watermelon and they made that Cajun. I mean, they done took Jesus and they done chump him out, made him Cajun. I mean, why can't we get an African open channel? You see, we don't accept our culture because we don't know our culture, and we allow others to assign an understanding of our culture. Just like with this Creole thing. You know, it's an assigned culture that white folks don't want to tell you the true history in your relationship as to how many of us have come to know or accept ourselves as Creole. And when you find the division and the damaging mentalities that exist among those who call themselves Creoles and referencing their black selves, some of them don't believe that they're black. You go up North Louisiana in Natchitoches and talk with some of the lighter skinned black folks there. You know, they say I'm Creole because I'm a little I got a little bit of Indian in me. I'm Creole because I got a little bit of Indian and black. Then some of them say, I have no Indian, no black, nothing. I'm just a unique people. I have no black history whatsoever, no connection whatsoever. This is the distortion of our history. And under those levels of distortion of understanding of who we are, it is very difficult for us to generate economics for ourselves. In other words, when I say that, I want to be clear. We have to, the movement, Black Lives Matter, can be very significant. But those are words that we must bring to fruition in terms of understanding what that really means. We have to be able to put a value on black that creates and generates economics for us. Caller, you're on the air. Comment or question?
Yes, I wanted to say a fantastic program, Brother Takuna.
Thank you, sir.
I just love to hear the conscious intelligence that you're able to bring to Southwest Louisiana. But I know you remember when Agnes Derwan was a news anchor, she just about made Acadiana a household name. And when TV3 was tied with her, you know, she had lost her beauty and stuff and everything. Well, they got rid of Agnes Derwan. Well, but where is Acadiana located on a map? You know, please help me with a designated location on a map, not anywhere. And media, mostly everyone in power wants you to believe we are all one. They don't see color. This building that we're in right now, this multi-million-dollar building that is called the Rosa Parks building, not one black contractor, I repeat, not one black contractor had anything to do with this building. And this building cost a couple of millions of dollars. But when the artists a little mere $3,000. So the discrepancies, like you mentioned, it has always been here. When they would call me a little nigger in school, I would call them a Cajun, coon ass, or redneck. All of those, you are absolutely correct.
Yes.
All make the same thing. And thank you so much, my brother. I would love to see part 2 of your program.
Yeah. Well, thank you, sister, for the call. I want to mention that again, which she brought up the media. Look at the black media personalities you have now. All of them make reference to this area as Acadiana, Cajun area. And who did we have? Who did we have for the part of the Black History Parade? It was not the parade marshal. Certainly was significantly presented. If it was not a black TV personality from the news that exploits us every day through the media with this reference of Acadiana and Cajun. This is how they use us against us. Now listen, I want to, because I can't do everything I need to do in an hour, but I want to bring something clear to you before I run out of time. When I say cultural economics, I'm not talking no lightweight stuff. Let's look at UL football team. UL football team is predominantly black. Predominantly a black football team. The new head coach has 16 staff members. You have 2 white females and you have 2 black males. Everybody else is a white male. This is the UL football team. This football team has a $27.3 million impact on the black community. It is 98% of white businesses that benefits from the economic impact of the black of our UL football program. Yet, over 85% of the football players that generates the income are black. These are our resources from our community. When you look at the salary, you have the 16 on the coaching staff. You have 14, you have 12 whites, you have 14 whites, 2 of them are female, and you have 2 black assistant males. The coaching salaries is $2.6 million. How does that calculate in our minds? Here, you have 85% of a football team that generate millions of dollars for this community. Millions of dollars, and promotes us into culture genocide. They use black athletes to generate the economics, and what do we get for it? We get the privilege of being insulted with the historical racial slur nigger in the name of Cajun. This is culture genocide. This is culture terrorism. Our students are being dumbed down to this reality. If our student would rise up like the majority of the white students who just rose up all over the country because of the killing in the schools, we could shut this thing down in 30 days. Now, the black basketball team at UL, you have 15 players. You have 2 white players. So the core of the athletic program, both football and basketball and track, contains mostly black athletes. How is it that from an economic perspective, we get very little? Most of the black athletes don't want to even discuss this because the oppression that is within the institution to deny them access to the black community, to talk to elders who know better, won't allow them to associate with us. And if they are allowed to do so, most of them are too afraid to lose their scholarship, giving up their manhood, giving up their womanhood for a scholarship while they perpetuate self-hatred and economic exploitation and culture genocide among their own people. This is culture terrorism. You can call it what you want, but this is culture terrorism. Now, when you look at the basketball team, you have 10 people on the coaching staff. You have 2 black assistants, 1 white female. The same scenario. The same scenario is taking place in terms of the football. Where does the economic go? Who generates the economic and who gets it? Certainly not the black community. Now, I know my time is winding down, but I want to share just one major point that I need to make sure you not that you have and that you not leave with. There's an organization association at UL is called the BFSA. What is the BSFA? That's the Black Faculty and Staff Association. My question is, what are you doing? Why are you not questioning this whole Cajun mania? Why are you not questioning the exploitation of our federal and state dollars? Why are you not questioning the cultural and historical well-being of the student? This is a Black Faculty, Staff, and Staff Association. I know some of these staff members from that association by, not necessarily personally, but I know them by reputation. And many of them would not even attack the Ebola virus on their face unless they had the permission of white people. They would rather die being in good favor with white people than to attack the Ebola virus on their face. How are we going to get representation for our students? How can we talk about taxation and taxation without representation is not a real issue? No, brothers and sisters. What our mayor is talking about is cultural economics. He's talking about cultural self-hatred for us. He's talking about cultural genocide. He's talking about the misuse and abuse of tax dollars. He's talking about cultural piracy. He's talking about cultural terrorism. Because Acadiana, as one of the callers said, where is it on the map? Acadiana is only a word that white folks created because they misspelled Acadia. That's your Acadiana. So when we go into the black community and we see fleur-de-lis symbols, Acadiana this, Acadiana that, and then black folks say, where are you from? I'm from Acadiana. And walking around with raging Cajun shirts, they know they got us dumbed down and we're using our own resources and energy to promote their economic culture while we promote self-hatred and foolishness among our people. That's why I apologize to the young people, because I know my foolishness about not understanding the full scope of this whole Santa Claus project. That was wrong. That was a mistake out of ignorance. And being ignorant about something is not bad when once you come out of ignorance and you know better, you're man enough or woman enough to admit what you've done wrong and correct the issue. How many black men and women know they're wrong about this Cajun Acadiana thing, but still don't have the courage, to stand up for what is right? So, my beloved brothers and sisters, I know my time is winding down really sharp, and I want to leave you with a positive understanding of what you should and could be doing. And it is very simple. Don't use the word Cajun. Don't use the word Cajun dumb. Don't tell people you're from Acadiana. Because the bottom line is, if you were black and African yesterday, you're certainly black and African today. And unless you do something unnatural to yourself, you will be black and African tomorrow. So I say, be your beautiful black self. I wrote this book, and it's my code. Black I am, Cajun Creole I am not. Understand the power of that statement and grow to be a beautiful black person. Being black doesn't necessarily mean you got to be against anybody or not appreciate the cultural richness of others. It just means you got to accept yourself before you can create any type of economic or cultural or social base that's going to be meaningful for you and nurturing for you and your community and your people. I thank you, brothers and sisters, for listening. Assalamu alaikum.